Hello and welcome to Songs for the Struggling Artist, the blogcast. This is episode 401. My name is Emily Rainbow Davis. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the 400s, the episodes of the 400s. If this is your first time here, welcome. The way this works is I'm going to say a few words, then I'm going to read you a blog, and then I'm going to sing you a song. If this is your 401st time here, welcome back, and thank you. And to all the people in between, 1, 2, 5, 7, however many times you've been here before, I thank you for being here now. Today's blog is about time travel again. Am I obsessed? I might be. I don't know. I feel like I'm approaching it from different angles. And maybe, aging is a kind of time travel, and I think that's part of it. It's like looking at the very linear way I am traveling through time means that sometimes I'm also looking at the possibilities of what if I could travel through time another way? Anyway, I think that's what's going on here. Who else? Who knows? So let me read this one to you. It is called I Would Accept That Time Travel Invitation. The other day, I was feeling so much despair about how things are and where we were headed as a culture. I thought, if someone showed up with a time machine and asked me if I wanted to go back to the 70s or 80s to live, I'd absolutely say yes. I told my friend about this feeling, and she said, I'm coming with you. We figured we should bring her kids and her husband. She was pretty sure they'd want to go too. And my partner and maybe another friend of ours and her family if they were up for it. And we were ready to start over in the past. A past that would be familiar because we lived through those decades as children, but would likely look different through our adult eyes. It just feels as though our wired up world has gone too far and is probably irreversible. So starting over in the past seems easier somehow. Back there in time, we could have an evening with friends stretch out into the night as if we were the only people in the world for a while. We wouldn't have 1,000 other people in our pockets waiting for our attention. We'd only look at the news once or twice a day. We'd write letters. We'd call our families on the telephone. If they weren't home, we'd call back later. We'd read books from the library and watch TV when it was on. There's something very appealing about scaling back to the speed and scale of earlier times. But even while I was fantasizing, I was trying to appreciate the advances of now that I would miss if we went back in time. What would I need to pack? I'd have to bring a lifetime supply of migraine medication, for one. I would not want to rely on the old stuff. Would I want to stash a laptop in our time machine? In the 70s and 80s, I didn't have much use for computers, but now my laptop is an important tool for my writing, and I record my music and podcasts on it. Come to think of it, will I have to convert a bunch of podcasts to cassette so I can keep some podcasting in my life? Or maybe I just listen to the radio again. There are many things to appreciate about a smartphone, but I'm fairly certain I'd be happy to surrender mine. I like being able to check the weather or the ferry schedule or text my friend when I'm late, but life without it was somehow better. Having the world in our pockets is kind of a lot to carry. I have pretty decent boundaries when it comes to tech. I only check my email on my computer unless it's an emergency. I try to set time limits on social media, and I am very willing to ignore calls or texts. I'm sure I've shared this story before, but back when cell phones were starting to become ubiquitous, a friend of mine worried about getting one because she didn't want to be reachable all the time. I didn't have one yet either, but we laughed at her because we felt she could just turn her phone off if she wanted to be left alone. Oh, she said, I guess I could. Well, joke's on us because she was right and we were wrong. Hardly anyone turns off their phones to be left alone anymore. We are expected to be almost always available. I had no cell service while I was in Greece last year, and I could only get Wi-Fi up at the top of the hill of our village. It was kind of nice. But it was also a bit stressful since everyone else in my life was not in a Cretan village with no Wi-Fi or cell service. I was a very slow adopter of the smartphone. I resisted a very long time, but I caved. Yes, I did. But to live again in a world without these very useful tools would be really nice. There are a bunch of foods I would miss back in the past, of course, ones I assume I'd have trouble getting. I long for bubble tea and Vietnamese coffee. Depending on where we landed our time machine, it might be hard to get avocados or mangoes. I didn't really have either until college, maybe? Would I ever see a gooseberry again? I'd miss the globalization of food in a lot of ways if I went back in time. I feel fairly certain it was probably harder to find good coffee in those years. I don't know, though, because I didn't fall for coffee until the 90s. I'd have to relearn a bunch of stuff, I'm sure, but I think in exchange, I'd get a life less interrupted. I would be present everywhere I went. I would, I suspect, be a lot less anxious. If I was worried about news from my doctor, I would just expect a phone call, not multiple texts to let me know there was an email. I'd have less information available. I wouldn't be able to see my test results in a medical portal, but on the plus side, I'd hear about those results directly from a doctor and not spend weeks wondering what they meant and falling down a self-diagnosing rabbit hole. However, if I got diagnosed with something serious, I'd want to get back here to the present pronto. Treatments have improved a lot in the last few decades. I am so much less at ease in this world with all these devices and ways to reach me, but at the same time, I value so many things on the internet. Wikipedia is a wonder. What will I do without etymology online? When I go back in time, I'm going to have to go to the library again to find things out. And I love being able to access a world of music in my pocket. But is it really better than going to hang out in record stores? Music is incredibly important to me. I used to spend money I didn't really have to get it. But I just added up all my receipts from last year for my taxes, and I bought no music. I just have a subscription to Spotify, who are cartoon villains that don't even pay their less popular artists at all anymore. I want to go back in time and buy albums from all my favorite artists to play on my record player. Music just doesn't sound as good on my phone or my computer. Will I be sad to give up my access to newer and younger, more far-flung artists when I go to the past? I will. I will miss Ellie Dixon and Fatoumata Diawara, for example. But I will re-listen to XTC's Skylarking with a lot more attention. I was listening to a podcast about a new terrifying technology that now exists, face searching, and there was a lot of talk about whether or not we could put the genie back in the bottle. I guess my fantasy of going back in time is a fantasy of putting a lot of genies back in their bottles at once. Each step along the way felt sort of unremarkable at the time. Like, sure, neat, cell phones. People carry them around with them. They must really love talking on the phone. And then, texting. I guess that's kind of handy, now that so many of us have ended up with these in our pockets, and now we have the whole internet in our pockets too, and all of our friends via all the social networks and whatnot. We're so connected. And yet somehow, even though I have thousands of friends there, I have fewer and fewer in real life. Is this the dream? If someone had let me know the trade-offs when this kicked off, I wouldn't have chosen it. But then I don't think it was ever much of a choice. I resisted all of these things until I had to join in. I wasn't on board until almost everyone was already on board. We are social animals. When 6 monkeys have a cell phone, the 7th monkey will get one too eventually, if it wants to hang out with the other monkeys. So, having watched this reality form slowly, without my enthusiastic consent, I feel ready to return to simpler, less cyber-connected, but more human-connected times. If it takes a time machine to do it, I'm in. And I'm bringing a whole community with me, I'd wager. It's possible that podcast about face-searching technology was the trigger for this brain journey. I don't know. It was a very scary podcast. It's a search engine is the podcast if you want to scare yourself about what face searching can do. Oh. I don't know if I recommend it. It is interesting, but also very scary. And so far no one's invited me to go back in time for real. But, I'm up for it. So, what song? Well, I was like, okay, something from the 80s, maybe, since I'm contemplating going back to the 80s or the 70s. And I was looking at what are some good ones I haven't done yet so far? And I don't know. It's like what represents a time. And I then was like, looking through my list of songs that I have considered for other blogs, and stumbled upon a 10,000 Maniacs song. I thought, I could do this one, but then I thought, maybe there's a better 10,000 Maniacs song, and there is. So, what I am going to sing for you is a song called "Like the Weather," which was their first original hit. Their first hit was a cover of Peace Train, Cat Stevens' Peace Train. And then this song was their first song that they made. That was a big, big hit. This album came out in 1987, which to me feels much earlier than I imagined it coming out. I thought I was older when this song emerged. I suspect this album was a lot more formative than I realized at the time, or in even recent years. Anyway, it doesn't sound like the 80s, I guess, is the thing. Or at least what we think of as that's an 80s sound. That's an 80s vibe. That's what the 80s felt like. There's a way where, a show like Stranger Things, for example, which is kind of a lot of nostalgia for a particular period. It's not the whole picture. It can't be, we cherry pick what was fun at the time or whatever when they do that sort of period exploration. But for me, this 10,000 Maniacs song I'm going to sing for you was extremely important, an extremely important part of the 80s. It doesn't sound like, I don't know, it doesn't have that synthy kind of 80s sound at all. It's a very folky, jaunty tune, but it is in fact from 1987. So I thought I would sing it for you, also because it's just a song I like, and it was nice to revisit it. So I'm going to play that for you in just a moment. Meanwhile, thank you so much for listening. It really means the world to me. If you like this blogcast, please tell someone about it. Review, subscribe in all the podcast apps, and there are more and more and more of them. I just found out about a bunch that I missed completely because my audio drama, The Defense, was featured on something called The End, which is a newsletter about shows that are complete. And the guy who organizes that has a whole list of places to find this audio drama. And I was like, I don't know half of these. So now this podcast is on those places. That podcast is on those places. What are they? I couldn't tell you right this second. Podbean, I think, is one of them. Anyway, so wherever you are, it's such a delight to find that someone is already liking and appreciating a podcast there. So thank you in advance. And if you'd like to support this podcast, that would be amazing. Patreon.com/EmilyRDavis is a prime place to go. There's also Ko-fi, there's PayPal. All those links are in the show notes. You could also subscribe on Substack. Tell me your feelings about Substack, because some people are like, hey, there's Nazis on there. And it does sort of feel like maybe one should not stay upon Substack when there are Nazis, but there's Nazis everywhere, right? So I don't know. Anyway, let me know your feelings about Substack. I am confused. Also, if there's another place that you prefer to support people, please let me know what it is, and I will join it. And mostly thank you for listening. That's the best. Okay, so what do I want to tell you about this song? Well, it's very jaunty for a song about basically depression. And I thought you might enjoy. The song is all about it being like a really depressing day weather-wise, like it's rainy and cold. And here, when I recorded it here in New York City, it is warm and hot and sunny. So don't worry. If this song makes you worried, it's not cold and gray here in New York. So maybe that's the best time to listen to this kind of thing, is, when things are opposite. Anyway, so let me play for you. Here it is, 10,000 Maniacs, Like the Weather. The color of the sky, as far as I can see, is cold gray. Lift my head from the pillow and then fall again. Shiver in my bones just thinking about the weather. Quiver in my lip as if I might cry. But by the force of will my lungs are filled, and so I breathe. Lately it seems this big bed is where I never leave. Shiver in my bones just thinking about the weather. Quiver in my voice as I cry. What a cold and rainy day. Where on earth is the sun hid away? I hear the sound of a noon bell chime. Well, I'm far behind. You've put in about half a day, while here I lie. Shiver in my bones just thinking about the weather. Quiver in my voice as I might cry. What a cold and a rainy day. Where on earth is the sun hid away? Do I need someone here to scold me, or do I need someone who'll grab and pull me out of four-poster dull torpor, pulling downward? For it's such a long time since my better days. I say my prayers nightly. This will pass away. The color of the sky is gray as I can see through the blinds. Lift my head from the pillow and then fall again. Shiver in my bones just thinking about the weather. Quiver in places I might cry. A cold and rainy day. Where on earth is the sun hid away? A cold and a rainy day. I shiver, quiver, try to wait.